Let's talk about something that shapes a child's life from the moment they're born, but it's something we don't always see. We're going to explore what's called socioeconomic status and really dig into how it affects kids and their families in ways that might actually surprise you. All right, let's get into it.
So, what are these invisible forces really? Well, it's not just about how much money a family has in the bank. Nope. It's more like a complex web of different factors that can either swing doors wide open for a child or put up roadblocks before they even learn to walk.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll break down what socioeconomic status actually means. Then, we'll look at the real-world numbers, uncover some of the hidden struggles, and share a really powerful story that might shift your perspective. And finally, we'll talk about what we can all do to help.
Okay, first things first, let's build a solid foundation. What in the world are we talking about when we say socioeconomic status, or SES for short?
At its heart, SES isn't just a number on a paycheck. It's a bigger picture. It's a way of understanding where a family stands both financially and socially within their community, compared to everyone else.
And to get that big picture, we usually look at three key things. First, the total household income. Second, the education level of the parents or earners. And third, their type of job or occupation. It's the combination of these three that really tells the full story.
And this is where the rubber really meets the road. Think about it. For families with a higher SES, things like education and extracurriculars are often a huge priority. But for families struggling with poverty, the focus has to be on survival, right? It's about getting food on the table, keeping a roof overhead, and staying safe. Education is still vital, of course, but it can easily become a luxury when you're worried about the basics.
So that's the concept, but what does it actually look like in the real world? Let's take a look at some numbers to really grasp the scale of this.
Get this. In California, a full 20%, that's 1 out of every 5 kids under the age of 5, lives in a family with an income below the official poverty level. I mean, this is not some small niche problem. This affects a huge number of our youngest, most vulnerable kids.
And this burden isn't shared equally across all communities. Not at all. There's a major disparity here. The data for California shows that young Black, Latino, and Native American children are more than twice as likely to grow up in poverty compared to their white classmates. This really shines a light on some deep inequities that start right from the beginning of life.
And these layers of difficulty, they often pile up. For instance, if you look at kids with immigrant parents, they face a 20% greater chance of living in an economically disadvantaged home. It's just one more hurdle they have to clear. Now, I want to zoom in on one of the most extreme and often hidden burdens of poverty, homelessness. Because this isn't just about statistics, it's about the day-to-day reality for thousands upon thousands of families.
Before we go any further, this is so important. The words we use really, really matter. We try to talk about families experiencing homelessness, not homeless families. It's called people-first language, and it's a way of seeing the person, their humanity, before we see their temporary situation.
Okay, just try to wrap your head around this number. In 2015, 1 out of every 14 children under the age of 6 in California experienced homelessness. 1 in 14. To put that into perspective, picture a typical preschool class with, say, 28 kids. Statistically, 2 of those little ones would have been without a stable place to call home.
And the weight of that situation is just immense. It's so much more than just not having a house. It's the chaos, the constant instability, the exposure to all sorts of risks. It's the feelings of shame that might make a family hide what they're going through. It's having to focus every single ounce of energy on just surviving until tomorrow. For a child, that kind of stress it's completely overwhelming.
It's so easy for us to make assumptions about situations we haven't lived. But sometimes just a simple shift in perspective can change absolutely everything. Let me tell you a story that shows exactly what I mean.
So this was something a group of teachers who worked with low-income families actually said. They were frustrated. They saw parents who weren't showing up to meetings, who weren't volunteering, and they jumped to a conclusion. These parents just don't care. But then a social worker who overheard this asked them a very simple question. How did you get to work today? And with that one question, the whole conversation changed. The teachers, who had mostly just hopped in their cars and driven to school, were about to get a serious reality check.
And here was the huge disconnect. The teacher's assumption? It's a lack of caring. The reality? It was a lack of options. Very few of these families actually owned a reliable car. The public bus system was a mess, and many of them worked jobs where they couldn't just take time off in the middle of the day for a parent-teacher conference. The barriers had nothing to do with how much they cared. They were logistical. They were systemic.
That story is just a perfect illustration of why understanding the real challenges is so critical. So, where do we go from here? Let's pivot from understanding the problem to talking about what we can actually do to help.
Well, there are concrete things that programs and communities can do. It all starts with reaching out with a strengths-based approach. That means seeing what families can do instead of just focusing on what they can't. From there, it's about partnering with them, offering real practical help like clothes, food, or a bus pass, and making sure the child has a stable, consistent environment. And the big goal is to connect these families to a whole network of services that can help them get back on their feet.
And it's so important to remember that these economic struggles often go hand in hand with other major life stressors, like a parent being away for a long time due to military deployment, or maybe incarceration, or a serious illness. In every one of those cases, supporting that child and helping them stay connected to their parent is absolutely vital.
Which brings us to our last thought for today. That story about the teachers and the social worker, it happened in a school, sure. But the lesson? It applies everywhere. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. Beyond the classroom, in our own lives, in our own communities, where can we stop and challenge our own assumptions and maybe choose understanding instead of judgment?